Everyone, this is the Cloak and Dagger weekly briefing with Albert Marco and myself, Tony Nash. We have a few things to cover this week. First is the Fed. We've got a Fed meeting next week. We're going to try to figure out what's going on there. Obviously, tariffs. We're talking about tariffs, and we're talking about China. So before we get started, if you are not a subscriber to Cloak and Dagger, please go to the link on this page. You can subscribe for free. There's content you can read for free. Of course, we'd love for you to be a paid subscriber, but start with free, get comfortable with it, get paid eventually, and we interact with people on the Patreon all the time. So, Albert, Fed next week. So here's a little background. Since February, I've been saying that May could be a live meeting. When I said that, people told me I was crazy, because at that point, the consensus was that the first live meeting really would be September, after Jackson Hole, all this other stuff. But my contention was people are going to freak out about tariffs, and, it's going to be a mess, and they're going to, try to get the Fed to cut because they need more liquidity in the market and easier interest rates and all this stuff so that people could feel better about things. Tell me where I'm crazy.
You're not crazy. I mean, people like to laugh at us a lot until it comes to fruition, oil,
Yep.
Fed, so on and so forth. I mean, you're looking at this, 900 point ripper of a rally. Really, to me, it sounds like, Trump and Bassan are trying to pin any kind of pullback on the Fed and try to scapegoat them next week. I mean, I don't think that the Fed can cut rates. I mean, inflation is certainly going to be an issue second half of this year, and I don't think that the Fed wants to, trigger inflation sooner than that.
Yeah. So tell me about inflation, because my thoughts are this: we're likely to see things like food prices decline because exports of food will be down. So things like beef and pork, your bacon, all this stuff, your proteins are gonna be down because those exports will be down. Your wheat and other things, those prices will be down because those exports are down. So on some level, I see the tariffs helping to really cut down on that kitchen table type of inflation. Things like your paper products, things that we saw hoarded during the pandemic, all that stuff is made locally. So there's probably not going to be much impact on that stuff. So where do you see inflation coming? Is it in the supply cutoff of, say, electronics from Asia, that sort of thing? And
Yeah,
cars, of course.
yeah, I do think that the supply is going to be a little bit difficult in the next 3 to 6 months. I do think that oil will probably rally from this mid 50s up, right? So I mean
A
that's
quick rally or a slow rally?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I want to say slow, but because geopolitical things can happen pretty quickly, especially with Iran,
Right.
it could, we could see $75 within like 30 days. I mean, just the way it
30
is.
days. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's a lagging effect. I think shelter, which is the biggest component of CPI, has ticked down, but I think it'll probably ramp back up in the second half of the year. So I do think that
On
inflation.
what? On
Well,
what will
rent
shelter
on rent
prices rally on?
on
On what?
rent on
Rent.
yeah. I think the rents will go back up in the fall. I think that there's demand there, especially if there's tax cuts that the Trump administration are going to implement in June. I think that there'll be a little bit more liquidity sloshing around in the market, and that whenever you have that, you're definitely going to have some inflationary pressure. I think
Okay.
it's coming.
Okay. So let me ask you about rent, because obviously it's primarily in large cities where population is concentrated. And what we've heard from the administration, I'm not saying I buy into this or not. I'm just asking you. What we've heard from the administration, and we saw it in the employment data today actually, is as these illegal residents leave the US, we'll see less stress on the rent markets and on the housing markets and other things from people who are not legally in the US. Is that a reasonable line of thinking? I've heard that a few times out of the administration. Is that a reasonable line of thinking?
No, I think it's
Okay.
very minimal. I don't think it's a big component of it. A lot of those illegals actually pay cash, and they're not really on, like, they're not really a like subset of the data that actually makes what they compute CPI from. So I don't think so. On top of that, a lot of this Doge, like, layoffs or firings that they have, most those people are most likely going to be rehired again in the fall.
Yep.
So, you look at that, and Trump will claim job growth, just like Biden claimed job growth for COVID.
Of course, it's politics.
Yeah, of
Right?
course. I mean, of course they'll do that. So again, I think that the cities will start coming back as government jobs come back, and corporations start hiring after tax cuts.
Yeah. And so I want to bring this back to the Fed in a minute, but I want to talk about commercial real estate for a second as well, because here's been my running thesis. As the federal government forces people back into the office, you're going to see more other companies go back to those downtown cores and back to those offices. And that will have downstream effects on, say, the restaurants and the other things surrounding those buildings. Do you see that return to office as a major tailwind for the economy going into the second half of the year and early 26?
No,
No,
I
you
don't.
don't.
And I'll
Okay.
tell you why. Because specifically restaurants, and I go on and on about this because you see restaurants, charge more. Labor is high, inputs are high, right? The food prices are higher. They start charging more. Customers start dropping off, and then they charge even more to the point where they're in a death spiral and they go out of business. I see the same thing happening. I don't think that. I think food for normal people, groceries, as you mentioned before, will come down slightly, but I don't think that inputs for restaurants like from Cisco and whatnot are going to come down, right? There's transportation costs, labor costs, and everything else
Right.
that baked
No,
into that.
but what I'm saying, and I'm not disagreeing with you on the restaurant
Mm-hmm.
costs, but what I'm saying is, as the feds have to move back into the office, other companies have to move back into the office because, first of all, it becomes a normal thing. And second of all, they have to be nearby the government to service them. So, do you see an economic tailwind, at least a marginal economic tailwind, of people moving back into offices? You don't.
Maybe marginally small, but not really. I don't think that there's that much. People are really price conscious of inflation and things, all those components that they used to spend money on. People are going less to the bars, they're going less to coffee shops, they're going less to restaurants. The
Money's
business.
tight,
It,
regardless of
it
whether
is.
the official data say it. Money is tight.
Yeah, that's the reality. Everyone making under $250,000 a year is feeling it. There's no
Strapped.
question,
Yep.
right? So why would you go and why would you go and buy a $25 hamburger when you can just pack your lunch? It's just I don't see anything. Why would you go to these like stores that are charging 30-40% extra on top of what they used to charge
Yep.
for simple items?
Or more.
I don't see it.
Yep. So yeah, I mean, I think we've all seen that chart showing Chick-fil-A was like $4 back in 2019, and now it's like $9 or something like that. I mean, it's crazy. McDonald's, the inflation of McDonald's, other places, you can't go out and get a cheap lunch, right?
Yeah, I mean, McDonald's actually had for the first time in a long time, McDonald's had less foot traffic in their stores.
Yep.
Right, they actually lost money this quarter, and that's kind of surprising because you look at like the dollar value menu meals, which I always look at for as a component of like trying to gauge what the economy is doing and how tight things are. I mean, things are so tight that even like the dollar value menu meal, like it's too expensive for some people.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So getting back to the Fed, acknowledging that things are tight for people making under $250,000. So money's tight. Inflation is coming down, at least for kitchen table type of items.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs seem to be okay. We saw a jobs report out today, and we had 190 some thousand jobs created or something like that, which is okay. It's not great. It's not terrible.
It's bullshit the way they use the
Of
BLS.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course it is. It's political. It's always political. So, um, do do you think there's a chance the Fed cuts by 25 next week?
No,
No chance.
no.
Okay.
I think that they're so deathly afraid of inflation starting up again that for them to sit there and cut 25 basis points after a good jobs report, after 1,000 point rally in the market is just asinine. And I think that the Trump administration is, dreaming that they're going to be able to press Powell to do such a thing.
Okay. Is June live or no?
I think
It's a
so.
long way away.
Yeah, I think so.
You
I
think
think
June's live. So you think there'll be 25 in June?
I think so. I think after the next dip, that situation might be a little bit more complex, especially because trade talks are kind of stalling here and there. So I think they're going to have to do something.
Okay. So I'm going to put a 35% chance on a rate cut next week, which anybody who watches my social media knows that I think 35% is a bullshit economist's hedge. Just to say that there's a probability.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's always a possibility. There's always a probability that it's
Right.
dovish and whatever. But yeah, I mean, I would give it low whatever.
Okay. Good. I'll say
Yeah.
35% probability of a cut next week. It's not zero. It's definitely
No,
not
it's never
zero.
zero. And honestly, going forward, every month after that is probably a 10% higher chance that they cut, and they will cut at some point when the economy is just out of gas.
Yep. Okay, let's move on to tariffs. So there's been a lot this week about, is China talking to the US? Is China not talking to the US? You and I both know for a fact that there are informal discussions happening between the two countries. Of course there are, right?
Uh-huh. Always,
Sorry.
of course, always.
Right. And so China's taken off some of their high tariffs on some US goods, jet engines and aircraft parts and that sort of stuff, which helps. And I think it's reasonable and it's necessary, as the US took off some of its high tariffs for some things earlier, right? So there is some movement on both sides. We've seen with Japan, the Japanese side has said that they don't want to remove non-tariff barriers on US cars and other things. Albert, here's my question. Okay. I hear from Japanese, Koreans, Europeans, Chinese, other people that American cars are garbage, but they all have non-tariff barriers on US cars. So I guess my question, and this is just one example of a bunch of stuff, right? But if US cars are so terrible, then why are they protecting their markets from US cars?
Because American cars have status symbol, right? You get a Ford Mustang in Europe, and it's a big deal. You don't see them very often, so it's a status thing. You'll have a market for it, right?
Right.
They are absolutely garbage cars, but it's just the whole status symbol thing for a European or an Asian to have an American car is a significant selling point.
Right. So they are afraid of American cars.
Well, of course. I mean, China, the most popular car, the American car in China a while ago was Buick, believe it or not.
Oh, it still is. Yeah, Buick
Oh,
is
it's
huge
still,
in
yeah,
China. Yeah,
huge. Yeah,
huge.
yeah. So I haven't kept up with it, but I do remember that it was like one of the best selling like status symbol American cars you could get
Yeah.
in China. So, like I said, it's a status thing. American cars are desirable. The tariffs make it really hard to buy in those countries. But, if you can buy it,
Right.
you're up there.
So what I think actually is that things like SUVs, even the small SUVs, trucks, some of the sports cars would be more appealing in these markets than their trade negotiators want to admit. So the other thing I'm thinking about is the administration has worked very hard to get more automotive manufacturing in the US. And so what I'm wondering is if they're trying to get a concentration of automotive manufacturing so they can then start exporting to other countries. So, I guess what's kind of broken in my mind is I just can't reconcile the fact that every European will say American cars are crap, don't buy them. Japanese people will say American cars are crap. Everyone else will say that. But then they have very difficult trade restrictions on US cars. So there's something to it. And that's the type of hypocrisy that I think is being borne out in these trade discussions.
Yeah, I mean, the Europeans saying that American cars are crap is kind of funny when the French and British cars were
Oh,
no, like just complete
yeah,
garbage. I mean,
right, exactly.
you can't even drive those things without
Would you buy anything but a German car?
No, absolutely not. There's nothing. I mean, even Italian cars, they're beautiful to look at, but they're just absolute disasters electronically. I mean,
Just a lot of maintenance. Yeah.
no, they had to get the Germans in there to fix it.
Well,
You
and
know?
even the German cars, some of my friends have been high-end German car owners for a long time, and they've had serious frustrations with German cars over the last 5 or 6 years.
Well, I'm a big Mercedes guy. I've got
Yep.
multiple Mercedes and I love them. But the thing is I don't buy the newer ones because of those issues that you
Yep.
brought up. I tend to get the older, low mileage ones because they're simple, a lot less complicated, a lot easier
Yep.
to fix. Parts are readily available, right?
Yep.
So,
Exactly. Yep. So maybe the Europeans are afraid of some American cars at least displacing
oh, of
their Ford.
course, of course they would.
Yeah.
The sports car industry, which is the most lucrative one, they would definitely have a hard time uh, selling against the Ford Mustang that's hitting their streets.
Cheaper,
Yeah, big time.
high performance. Of it needs maintenance and everything, but cheaper, high performance. They need to fix the interiors and make them nicer, but you know,
Corvette did a good job actually.
they did.
But
But I can't, I look at Corvettes as they drive by, and I think if that had a different nameplate on it, it would be really like if it was a Lamborghini or something and it looked like that.
yeah, but
Great, but it's a Corvette, so it looks like desperate middle-aged guy car.
well, they made a mistake. I mean, we're getting off topic to talk
Yep,
cars, but they made a mistake going with that mid-engine and making it such a shit car. It looks beautiful, but it's a piece of shit, right?
yep.
When they had the Z06, the previous model, I mean, the Italians went in there and put like Alcantara leather and decked it out. It was an absolute monster of an automobile. It still
Mhm.
is. The Z06, I, before this mid-engine version came out, was astonishing car.
Mm.
But here we
But
are.
there you have it. People are afraid of American cars. I mean, let's just be real about it. So, okay, before we go on to the last topic, Albert, on China, I want to talk about two things. First, I want to remind people, please subscribe to our channel. We're trying to build this channel, so please like and subscribe this video. Also, please go over to the Cloak and Dagger link in this video and subscribe for free so that you can get alerts on the great content that we're putting out. Okay. Albert, one question before we move on to China. Tell us about the watch.
Oh God, this ridiculous
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
I've been actually hunting this watch for, oh God, 5 years,
yeah.
and it's an Omega. I don't know if you can see it. It's an Omega solid gold. Uh,
Beautiful.
I think there's maybe like a dozen left in the world, and it came up on auction, and they mislabeled it and whatnot. And I ended up buying it. Really shouldn't have, but I did anyways. um,
Good for you. Congratulations.
I'm a big watch guy.
Yep.
I'm really interested. It's really similar to the auto industry, believe it or not. They share parts. Manufacturers share parts. They lie about it. They steal each other's designs, so on and so forth. I think this tariff issues between the U.S. and Switzerland is a extremely big deal for Switzerland. It's on par with the quartz crisis,
Mm.
of the '70s right now, and I don't see how they'll be able to sell any Rolexes or anything else for that matter if those 30-some% tariffs hit. Why would you buy a Rolex for $26,000 when it really should be $17,000? It's a no go. I mean, the secondary market would not support such a move in the pricing.
People will just pause. They'll pause on it
Yeah, of
for
course,
a
and
few months and they'll wait for it to be worked out.
yeah, Rolex already upped their prices 3%, I believe,
Yeah.
last week or maybe this early this week. They did that. They announced it because of inputs and whatnot and inflation coming into, and they can get away with it more than anything
Yep.
else.
Exactly.
But
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to China. We posted a few pieces on China this week. One of them was on what would a potential US-China conflict look like. It was a month-by-month iteration of what would drive it, when would Japan get involved, when would India get involved, when would the Philippines get involved, all that stuff, right? So there is a play-by-play, month-by-month over the next, say, 9, 10 months of what each month would look like. Um, Now, both you and I are of the view that that's not going to happen.
mhm.
So we predicated that piece saying, this isn't going to happen. For the people wishing that Xi Jinping would be deposed, you better be careful what you wish for because the next person will likely be a harder liner person, all that stuff. So with China, Albert, tell us where your head's at with China right now and what they're thinking.
Right now, I think the Chinese are in a desperate situation. Right, their factories are completely empty. Right, they're getting economic stress. They just dumped 1 million ounces of gold to try to raise funds. Right, to pay for some of their Ponzi schemes that they got going on over there. I don't really think that the Chinese can last much longer. And aside from all like the we're gonna fight until the end and blah, the usual Chinese rhetoric,
Yeah.
right? I don't see how realistically how the Chinese can maintain this trade war going forward. I think that before July 4th, something's going to have to happen between the U.S. and China. Otherwise, China's going to have significant problems.
Well, we said on the election, we said China will last 3 to 6 months, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
From inauguration day.
Yes.
So we're right in that zone now. I think it's going to be toward the end of that, but they're pushing back as hard as they can. Their export numbers were out earlier today. Their exports are down 10%. That's a colossal understatement.
Oh yeah, for sure.
There's no way it's only 10% because the
Yeah.
US is 20-some% of Chinese exports.
Well, that's because that's the rhetoric that they used in like a lot of the media interviews is like, oh, the US is only 10-15% of our, of our market. It's like, yeah, but it's probably about
direct
80.
exports.
Yeah, but it's probably like 70% of the money that's coming in. So it's not that black and white there, buddy.
Yeah, it's a lot more. So okay, now we had a big US naval exercise in Southeast Asia last week. We saw China claim ownership of one of the islands that Philippines claims this week. Is that just kind of status quo, like not a lot, or you think it's a distraction, or do you think there's something really there?
I mean, this is like just their MO, really. I mean, they do this with the
Right.
Japanese. I mean, those disputed islands in Japan, the Sea of Japan. They claim them. The Japanese claim them, and whatever. They'll have fishing boat skirmishes here and there.
Yep.
A lot of that has to do with that. A lot of the food that comes, a lot of the fish that comes out of that region is from the Sea of Japan and down into the Philippines and whatnot.
Yep.
So those are very, very fertile fishing grounds, right?
Yeah.
And when you
They
see
won't be
these,
for long.
right? But when you see these, these numbers of the PLA Navy has like so many boats, but they're fishing boats, right? They're fishing boats that they're meant for these type of operations. They go in, they claim islands, they fish the shit out of it, right? And then they leave, right? The same thing happened just in Venezuela, believe it or not. The Venezuelans just were mentioning that fishing boats and whatnot were coming over off their coast and fishing illegally, all the way over
Yep.
here.
Yep. And I can guarantee the US will get much more aggressive about that.
Well, listen, the Trump administration, I voted for Trump, right? But a little bit disappointed here, right? Especially when you're trying to combat Chinese illicit activities and trade and whatnot. You're in a tariff war with them at the moment, but you allow so many other things happening, like they buy oil and minerals from Mexican cartels for pennies on the dollar. Like, I know this for a fact for God, like 10, 15 years. Right. Yeah. And then it just comes out in the news. Oh, this is what's happening over. Well, then do something about it, for God's sake.
Right.
Do something about it.
Yep. We got to keep talking about it so more people know about it. So, it's, I feel like Americans are tired of a lot of this nonsense that's gone on. And, it's only been 3 months, Albert.
I understand that, but in 3 months, it's like they seem like they went from 0 to 100 and then back to 0 again. Right?
I don't feel that way, but I could see how you could feel that way. Yeah.
Well, that's how I feel.
I can see that. So my annoying history self will remind people of this. The last Chinese military success was in the Chosun Reservoir in Korea 50, 70 years ago, something like that, right? Where US Marines were decimated. But we do not know the number of Chinese casualties in that. We do know that China invaded Vietnam in 1979, and it was an absolute disaster. And we also know that the most recent Chinese army success was killing their own people in Tiananmen Square in 1989. So,
The Chinese military is such a paper tiger. I don't even know why people even talk about it. I mean, they had joint operations with the Russians in Africa, and as soon as the militia started invading their area, their base, they ran away. They turned and ran away and left the Russian soldiers high and dry. Well, the Russians turned around and started firing on the Chinese.
of course,
Because that's what you do to people that flee.
yeah.
But like I don't know, I just this whole like China's gonna have some they're gonna be the next superpower militarily and blah blah blah. It's like, hey man, just take a look at history first before you start making such allegations.
Yeah.
And start coming to a little bit more logical conclusions of what they can and can't do in a short amount of time.
Oh, hey, before we go, I wanted to cover China, Europe. We have a piece that I think published today on Europe's kind of choice with regard to China. China moved from this wolf warrior diplomacy to overnight being kind of trying to be Europe's best friend and trying to create a wedge between the US and Europe. So, this is positioned as Europe having to decide between the US and China. Tell me what you think about that. Does Europe really have a choice?
No, they think they have a choice, but they don't have a choice. Right. I don't understand what they're thinking. I mean, we discussed this a little bit with Ralph the other week, yep. But the Europeans are at risk of being a Chinese dumping ground for cheap products and ruining their manufacturing sector, or whatever's left of their manufacturing sector.
Yep. That's right. So those German cars that we're frustrated about because they aren't doing well in recent years, that's because of Chinese influence in those German cars.
Of course.
It's not because of German innovation and German innovation has stalled out. It's because of Chinese influence in those.
There is no Chinese innovation. Like, you know what I mean? Like everyone thinks like the Chinese are so, innovative and whatnot. All they do is they take plans 5 years ahead from the Western companies that they bought, and then they build out whatever. But after the 5-10 years,
what I tell people is it's the D side of R&D. So they don't really do pure research. They don't really.
Yeah, exactly right.
They do development of other people's ideas, and they do it extremely well. So China's innovation is the D side of R&D, which, to be honest, they're really good at that.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that.
Commercializing the D side of R&D.
Yeah, especially when you have slave labor, you can definitely cut down the cost.
Exactly right. All right, guys. On that note, thank you very much for your time, Albert. Thank you so much for your time. And everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Thanks, Tony.